How's it going, everybody? So I just walked out of James Gunn's new Superman movie, and there are a lot of things I want to talk about. I initially started this YouTube channel last October because I wanted to talk about the upcoming DCU, and now it's officially here with James Gunn's Superman. Before I go any further, I will quickly mention that most of this video will be spoiler-free. I'll just go into my general thoughts on plot and characters, what I liked and what I didn't like. Then, in the second part of the video, I'll get into my thoughts on points that contain spoilers. So without further ado, let's jump into my spoiler-free thoughts on Superman. So first, I want to get into the positives, and the first thing I want to talk about are the characters, which in my opinion are definitely the strongest part of the film. James Gunn has always proven himself to be a character-driven director, and this film is no different. Starting off with David Corenswet as Superman. Wow, I thought I would like him, but I didn't think I would like him this much in the role. I really think he knocked it out of the park. He's charming, charismatic, and has good understandable morals behind his actions. He's also super corny, but I don't mean that as a knock. Superman is always a character I've understood to be a little corny, so I thought it fit perfectly within his character. Overall, this is pretty much the exact characterization of the character that I wanted to see, and to be honest, this is how I'd imagine meeting comic book Superman would be like in real life, and in general, I was really happy with how Superman was portrayed in this film. Next, another standout, and you kinda knew she was going to be, Rachel Brosnahan absolutely delivers as Lois Lane. She's a fierce reporter who is always asking the tough questions and trying to get to the bottom of the story. She is more than just a reporter in this movie, which is something I can't get into because I feel like it leans a little bit into spoilers, but overall, I'm gonna be real, I think this is one of the best portrayals of Lois Lane we've seen. Rachel and David just have such good chemistry with each other as their respective characters. Their relationship is very believable, and it's something I'm excited to see develop throughout the course of this universe. I also loved Ma and Pa Kent. There's a very short scene between Pa Kent and Superman that honestly is probably my favorite scene in the entire film. It's very emotional, and honestly, I wish it went on a little bit longer, but it was great seeing the Kents nonetheless. Krypto is also involved in this film. I don't know if you could tell by the endless amount of marketing, but yeah, he's here. I honestly thought he was going to be overused in this movie judging by the trailers, but he really wasn't. If you're somebody who owns a dog, I feel like you'll love Krypto. I could see a little bit of Krypto in all of my dogs I have at home, especially this one. Jokes aside though, I really did find Krypto's involvement to be enjoyable, especially as somebody who loves dogs. I also have to mention a couple other side characters, starting with Jimmy Olsen. I feel like Jimmy Olsen fans are going to be so pumped walking out of this movie. It has been a long time since we've had a faithful adaptation of Jimmy Olsen on the big screen, and I really enjoyed his character in the movie. He's not in it all that much, but I feel like he made the most out of the scenes he has. Another side character that I had a ton of fun with was Guy Gardner. He comes off as a total dick, which is exactly the way he is in the books. His scenes are pretty funny, and the constructs he makes with his ring are pretty cool. It makes me curious to see how the Lanterns are going to differentiate with their constructs in the Lanterns show next year. I think Guy Gardner is officially set to appear in that show alongside Hal and John, so I'm curious to see what they build with their rings in combat and how they differ their constructs from one another. Getting into some more positives, I really enjoyed the overall vibe of this movie. I heard a lot of chatter online about this feeling like an episode of Justice League Unlimited or Superman the Animated Series, and I honestly could not agree more. This really does feel like a live-action feature film length episode of Justice League Unlimited. There's not really any build-up, you're just thrown into the fire from the beginning of the film as if it were a comic book. It was something that worked really well for me. I also love that this adaptation of Superman is very lighthearted. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed Man of Steel, but that characterization seemed pretty dark for Superman. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but when it comes to Superman, I prefer a characterization that's a lot more lighthearted, and I guess you could say kid-friendly. I also love how comic booky this world feels as a whole. This is a very fantastical universe. Metahumans have been around forever, there's crazy technology, various superheroes, multiple villains Superman has to face off with. It feels like a very lived-in comic book world, and it's one of my favorite aspects of the film. If you're a total comic book nerd and you're looking for a fantastical comic book universe on screen, I think that you'll really enjoy this movie. Now let's move on to things I'm mixed or negative on. First, I want to talk about the character I'm least negative on, but I still feel like I had to throw in here, Mr. Terrific. I am 90% positive on this character. For the most part, I really enjoyed his scenes in the movie, and I think Eddie Gathegi gave a really good performance. However, there were some things about his characterization that I feel I can only get into in the spoiler part of the video, so I'll discuss those more there. I also feel like my criticisms of his character are pretty nitpicky, and I don't think you should walk into the movie expecting to be disappointed by his character, because from everything I've seen online, people think he's one of the standouts of the film. And for the most part, I agree. There's one scene in particular with him that's really fun to watch, and you'll know it when you see it. But there was just one part of his character that irked me just a little bit, so I'll get into that later. Next, I want to talk about Lex Luthor. This was the characterization I was most excited to see, and I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit let down. Don't get me wrong, I think Nicholas Hoult gives a phenomenal performance, but I feel like his character gets a little mustache twirly and monologue heavy. As a whole, I'm not negative about this character, especially the performance. I thought it was great. The character just didn't move me as much as I thought he would. One thing I can say I loved about Lex in this movie is how much of a hater he is. It reminds me of Superman the Animated Series. This dude is such a petty hater in this movie, and that's definitely one thing I really enjoyed. Honestly, I might have have gone in with way too high of expectations because I'm a huge fan of Nicholas Hoult, and I remember how pumped I was when he got cast in the role. I'm going to see it again by the time this video is uploaded, so I think I'll enjoy him more the next time I see him knowing what's coming. Overall, I'm mixed, but mostly positive with him, and I'm excited to see how his story evolves in the DCU. Next, and this is probably the thing that I most disliked about the movie, I think the humor is really out of place in a few scenes. You hear this criticism with every James Gunn movie, where he'll throw in a joke that cuts the tension of an emotional scene. I feel like there were a few in here that made me roll my eyes a little bit. I will say that in the same vein, there were also some jokes that I did laugh pretty hard at, particularly surrounding Guy Gardner, but I feel like the jokey nature of James Gunn's writing perfectly fits that character. I just felt like there were some moments that didn't need the joke thrown in, that's all. I've seen some people on Twitter say the DCU is screwed and it's gonna be all corny and quippy. I don't think so, because James Gunn isn't writing every DCU project. Like, I don't think you'll see James Mangold's Swamp Thing horror movie cracking jokes like they do in this movie, but overall, the jokey nature of James Gunn's movies has been a criticism of his pretty much for his entire filmmaking career. And if I'm being honest, it's no different in this one. So if that's something that completely ruined your enjoyment of the Guardians films or the Suicide Squad, I don't think that this movie will be for you. On that same topic though, I think if you liked those other James Gunn superhero films like Guardians and Suicide Squad, I think you'll like this one as well. The Justice Gang is also featured in this film with Hawkgirl, Guy Gardner, and Mr. Terrific. For the most part, I thought they were fun, and I don't think they overstayed their welcome like a lot of people thought they would. I liked Guy Gardner, and for the most part, I liked Mr. Terrific, but Hawkgirl gets completely shelved in this movie. I feel like they did my girl dirty a little bit, but there's a ton of characters packed into a 2-hour film, so what can you do? I just hope she gets more of a character spotlight in a project down the line, or maybe even as part of the Justice League in the future. And honestly, it's not just Hawkgirl. I feel like there was a couple characters that got the short end of the stick due to the plot being so packed. On the topic of the plot, let's talk about that. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, the plot in this movie is a total mess. Now, before you start panicking, let me just say that I don't think that's entirely a bad thing at all. When I say a mess, I mean a ton of stuff is going on, and it might feel like whiplash at times, especially for those who aren't versed in comic books. For me, I actually really liked how stuffed the plot was. I feel like a lot of my favorite comic books are like this narratively, so it didn't bother me at all. But as someone who's at the theater 4 to 5 times a month, I felt like it was something I should point out. Again, for me, and I think for much of you comic book fans, I don't think this will be a problem at all. I just put it in this category as a warning, sort of. But to be honest, it isn't something that really bothered me. I enjoyed the chaos. All in all, this was a film that I walked out of very happy. It's not a perfect movie by any means, and I'm not gonna lie and act like it's the best superhero movie since The Dark Knight, but it is a film that I thoroughly enjoyed. I know I stated a lot of things that I was mixed or negative on, but as a person, that's always how I've been. I tend to focus on negatives and get a little nitpicky, when in reality, I look back on the film very fondly, and I will be going back to see it twice this weekend. I'm going to give Superman a 7.8 out of 10. RIP Christopher Reeve. Okay, so that was my spoiler-free part of the video. You should probably click off now if you do not want to get spoilers before you go into this movie, because there is a lot of crazy reveals, so I'll give you just a little bit of time to click off the video, but do come back after you see the movie so you can watch my spoiler part of the video. So anyway, let's just jump into my spoiler thoughts now. So this isn't going to be a play-by-play of the movie, I just have some general thoughts on some things that I can't talk about in my spoiler-free review, so I'll talk about them here. So earlier in the video, I alluded to being not as fond of the Mr. Terrific characterization, and what I mean by that is, I just felt like his personality didn't really resemble the Mr. Terrific I remember from the JSA comics that I love. In the comics, Mr. Terrific is stoic and rarely makes jokes. His personality is kind of like Batman's in that way, so when he shows up in this movie and he starts quipping like any other comedic superhero character, I'm not gonna lie, it kind of threw me off a little bit. Again, I'm still overall positive on this character. I think his scene infiltrating Lex's portal was one of the best in the movie, and I think the way he uses his tech is awesome. But I didn't always see Michael Holt's characterization that I know from the comics in this character. Again, might just be a nitpick, but it was something that I did think a lot about. Also, there's one particular choice in the movie that I was just not a fan of, if I'm being honest. I'm talking about the revelation that Jor-El and Lara sent Clark to Earth to rule over humans and essentially make Earth a new Krypton. Initially, I thought nothing of it because I was sure they were going to pull the plug and reveal Lex had manipulated the footage, but no, this is real and the Elves sent Clark there to conquer Earth, essentially. This is a very bold choice. I don't recall the Elves ever being like this in main continuity DC. I know of an alternate universe version of Superman, ironically, I'm talking about Ultraman of Earth 3, who was sent to Earth to rule the planet, but as far as I can remember, this was never how the Elves were portrayed. I appreciate the effort to make a bold new take on the character, but this really didn't work for me. Like, dude, if Zod was this angry in Man of Steel, I can't even imagine how full of hatred he is for the Elves in this interpretation, because they probably suck. They were probably shitty people. Also, how can you justify Superman wearing the L crest on his chest from this point forward? Hey Superman, what does that symbol on your chest mean? Well, on the planet Krypton where I'm from, it actually stands for hope. Hope for what exactly? Hope to build a new Krypton on Earth? Again, I really did enjoy this movie and the interpretation of Superman, Superman, but this was something that I really did not like. Like, it almost felt like character assassination of Jor-El. It's not something that ruined the movie for me by any means, but it was something where I was like, well, that's definitely a choice. I do want to end on high notes though, so let's talk about Millie Alcock's first appearance as Supergirl. She randomly crashes through the roof of the Fortress of Solitude, and she's pretty intoxicated looking for Krypto. Superman clearly shows displeasure seeing her in her current state, but she doesn't care, and she takes Krypto and flies off. This scene was hilarious to me, and if you've read Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, the story her movie will be based off of next summer, you'll know that's exactly what her character is like in the comic books. James Gunn has described the DCU's Supergirl as much more jaded and rough around the edges than her cousin, and in my mind, that is the exact characterization I want to see. So although this was just a short cameo, I loved it, and it makes me really excited to see more from Supergirl in her movie next year. Like, I'm just imagining seeing that character interact with Lobo. I think that's gonna be absolutely hilarious, and honestly, I'm way more excited about Supergirl now than I was before, just from that short cameo. Also, I love how involved Jimmy and Lois are in helping Clark get what he needs to take down Lex. You can't just take down Lex Superman style. Sometimes you need characters like Lois and Jimmy to do the dirty work. They all play their part, and that's something I was glad to see. Also, quick thoughts on Ultraman. I think it was very obvious from like the opening of this movie that Ultraman was going to be a clone of Superman, and overall I'm kind of just indifferent on him. Like, this is not a villain that I'm gonna remember really, because the real villain is Lex Luthor. Like, Ultraman's just kind of a henchman. I just don't really have that many thoughts on him because I was kind of just indifferent on that character. But yeah, those are my overall thoughts on the Superman film. I had a great time. I think we're in very good hands for the DCU, which thank goodness. I was really worried about this movie's release for a while, because obviously those of you that have watched my channel for a while know, like, my whole channel is based around the DCU and building hype for the DCU. And if this movie flops, like if your Superman movie flops, your first movie in this new universe, you know that all these other projects are gonna get canceled, aside from the ones that are already in development. So thankfully, it looks like we're gonna have a hit on our hands. I think the movie's tracking for like 130 million opening weekend, which is great. And the reviews are pouring in from the fan screenings. It seems like most people loved this movie. I think this movie is going to make a lot of money. I think this is going to be a success for Warner Brothers. And yeah, we've officially kicked off the DCU, so I'm excited to hear your guys' thoughts. Let me know down below what you thought of the movie, and let's just go with what was your favorite scene? Like, what was your favorite scene in the movie? What was your favorite character in the movie? Those are things I'd like to hear. Anyways, guys, that's gonna be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.